The term Dark Ages has long been used to describe the centuries following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, roughly between the 5th and the 10th centuries CE. For centuries, this label has conjured images of chaos, ignorance, barbarism, and cultural stagnation, a world where civilization's light had been extinguished, leaving Europe in intellectual and social darkness. But as modern historians have revisited this era, they have discovered that this view is not only oversimplified, but deeply misleading. The so-called Dark Ages were, in reality, a period of profound transformation, adaptation, and resilience that laid the foundations for much of modern Europe. Far from being a time of total decline, it was a complex age of rebirth and innovation, interspersed with conflict and creativity. To understand why the Dark Ages were not truly dark, we must explore the origins of the term, the realities of post-Roman Europe, the rise of new powers, cultural and intellectual developments, and how modern scholarship has reframed our understanding of this misunderstood epoch. The phrase Dark Ages was first popularized during the Renaissance, particularly by Italian scholars such as Petrarch in the 14th century, who saw themselves as living in a rebirth of classical learning after what they perceived as centuries of decay. For Petrarch and his contemporaries, the millennium between the fall of Rome and their own time was viewed as an intellectual wasteland devoid of art, literature, and scientific advancement. This negative interpretation persisted through the Enlightenment, when historians like Voltaire and Edward Gibbon described the Middle Ages as an era of superstition and ignorance. The word dark thus came to symbolize not literal darkness, but the absence of written records, cultural achievement, and rational thought, especially when compared to the brilliance of ancient Greece and Rome. However, this perspective was largely Eurocentric and biased, focusing on Western Europe while ignoring the thriving civilizations elsewhere during the same period, including the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic caliphates, and the flourishing cultures of Asia and Africa. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, it did not simply vanish overnight, nor did Europe descend into anarchy. Rather, Roman political authority fragmented, giving rise to a mosaic of successor kingdoms, such as the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Visigoths in Spain, the Franks in Gaul, and the Anglo-Saxons in Britain. These new powers preserved many aspects of Roman administration, law, and culture, even as they adapted them to local traditions. The so-called barbarian kingdoms were not mindless destroyers, but active participants in shaping post-Roman society. The Franks, for example, under King Clovis, converted to Christianity around 500 CE, helping to cement the religion's place in Western Europe. Similarly, Theodoric the Great, ruler of the Ostrogoths, maintained Roman institutions and encouraged harmony between Goths and Romans in Italy. Rather than a collapse into darkness, these centuries were a time of reorganization and cultural fusion, a blending of Roman, Christian, and Germanic traditions that would define medieval Europe. Religion played a crucial role in maintaining social cohesion and intellectual continuity during these centuries. The Catholic Church emerged as the most stable institution in Western Europe, preserving literacy, learning, and administrative systems through its monasteries and clerical hierarchy. Monks became the guardians of knowledge, painstakingly copying manuscripts, preserving classical texts, and producing new works of theology, philosophy, and history. Figures like Saint Benedict, who founded the Benedictine order in the 6th century, established monastic rules that emphasized prayer, study, and labor, shaping monastic life for centuries to come. Monasteries, such as those at Monte Cassino and Iona, became centers of scholarship and education, ensuring that learning did not vanish even as political structures crumbled. The Christian Church also provided moral and social guidance, filling the vacuum left by the disintegration of Roman authority. Bishops and abbots often acted as mediators, leaders, and diplomats, bridging the gap between the sacred and secular worlds. Meanwhile, far from being isolated, Europe remained connected to a wider world. Trade routes persisted, albeit disrupted, linking the Mediterranean with the Middle East, North Africa, and even parts of Asia. The Byzantine Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, continued to thrive as a bastion of Roman law, Greek culture, and Christian theology. Under emperors like Justinian I, Byzantium preserved and codified Roman law in the Corpus Juris Civilis, a monumental legal work that influenced Europe's legal systems for centuries. Justinian's reign also witnessed remarkable architectural achievements, most notably the construction of Hagia Sophia, which stands as a testament to the era's engineering brilliance. Simultaneously, in the 7th century, the rise of Islam transformed the Mediterranean world. The Islamic caliphates not only expanded politically, but also sparked a cultural and scientific renaissance. Scholars in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo preserved and expanded upon Greek and Roman knowledge in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The works of Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy were translated into Arabic, studied, and later reintroduced to Europe, fueling the intellectual revival of the later Middle Ages and Renaissance.
The Dark Ages. Were they really that dark? If the Dark Ages were truly dark, it was not for lack of intelligence or creativity, but because later historians failed to appreciate the forms those qualities took. The early medieval period saw remarkable developments in art, architecture, and literature. The intricate metalwork of the Sutton Hoo treasures, the illuminated manuscripts such as the Book of Kells and Lindisfarne Gospels, and the construction of early churches all demonstrate a vibrant aesthetic culture. These works combined Christian symbolism with local traditions, creating a unique visual language distinct from classical art. In literature, the epic poem Beowulf and the chronicles of Bede's ecclesiastical history of the English people reflect both the spiritual and heroic values of the age. Even the Latin language evolved during this time, giving rise to early vernacular forms that would eventually become modern European languages. Politically, the early Middle Ages were indeed turbulent, but out of that turbulence emerged new institutions and ideas that would shape Europe for centuries. The Carolingian Empire, established by Charlemagne in the 8th century, represents one of the period's greatest achievements. Charlemagne's reign marked a renaissance of learning and administration, often referred to as the Carolingian Renaissance. He invited scholars such as Alcuin of York to his court, established schools, standardized Latin script through the development of Carolingian minuscule, and promoted education among the clergy and nobility. His efforts revived intellectual life and strengthened the unity of Western Christendom. The coronation of Charlemagne as emperor by Pope Leo III in 800 CE symbolized the fusion of Roman, Christian, and Germanic traditions, a powerful synthesis that defined medieval European identity. Yet the Dark Ages were not without their hardships. The collapse of central Roman authority led to frequent warfare, insecurity, and economic decline in some regions. Urban centers shrunk, trade networks contracted, and literacy rates among the general population fell. The Viking, Magyar, and Saracen invasions of the 9th and 10th centuries added further instability, spreading fear and destruction across much of Europe. Famines, plagues, and local feuds also took their toll. However, even in the face of such adversity, medieval society proved resilient. The feudal system, often criticized as rigid and oppressive, provided a framework for mutual protection and land management in a world without strong central government. Castles, fortified towns, and local alliances allowed communities to survive and even prosper despite constant threats. Moreover, the adversity of the age spurred innovation in agriculture, such as the introduction of the heavy plow, the horse collar, and the three-field crop rotation system, which significantly increased food production and laid the groundwork for population growth and urban revival in the later Middle Ages. It is also crucial to remember that the concept of darkness applies very differently outside Western Europe. During this same period, the Islamic world experienced one of the greatest intellectual flowerings in history. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba became centers of learning where scholars of various faiths worked together to advance science, medicine, and philosophy. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was a beacon of knowledge, translating and preserving ancient texts while producing groundbreaking new research. In China, the Tang and Song dynasties oversaw advancements in printing, gunpowder, and navigation, innovations that would later transform the world. In the Americas, the Maya and other indigenous civilizations continued to flourish, developing sophisticated calendars, architecture, and mathematics. These global perspectives reveal that the Dark Ages were not universally dark, but rather a time of uneven development, with some regions flourishing while others struggled. The later Middle Ages, 11th to 15th centuries, are often described as a transition out of the so-called Dark Ages. But the roots of that transformation lay deep in the earlier centuries. The agricultural and technological innovations of the early medieval period allowed for population growth, urbanization, and the revival of trade. The emergence of guilds, universities, and new forms of governance in the later period built upon the social and economic foundations laid in the centuries following Rome's fall. The rediscovery of classical learning during the 12th century Renaissance was not a sudden miracle, but the result of centuries of preservation and transmission by monks, scholars, and translators. Even the Gothic cathedrals that define medieval Europe owe their existence to the engineering and artistic experimentation of earlier centuries. Modern historians now reject the term Dark Ages because it reflects outdated prejudices rather than historical reality. The phrase implies a uniform decline in culture and progress, yet the evidence paints a far more nuanced picture. Archaeological discoveries across Europe have revealed bustling towns, trade networks, and artistic workshops that belie the idea of cultural collapse. Coins, pottery, tools, and manuscripts show that economic and intellectual activity persisted throughout the early medieval centuries. Moreover, recent scholarship emphasizes continuity rather than rupture between the Roman world and the Middle Ages. The transformation from empire to medieval Europe was gradual, adaptive, and creative, rather than catastrophic. The church, monasticism, and emerging kingdoms all played vital roles in maintaining the thread of civilization.
The Dark Ages, were they really that dark? Why then does the myth of the Dark Ages persist? Partly because it serves as a convenient contrast to later periods of perceived progress, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the modern age. By labeling the early Middle Ages as dark, historians and intellectuals of those later eras could define themselves as enlightened and superior. The term also survives in popular culture because it evokes drama and mystery. Castles, knights, and plagues make for vivid imagery. Yet, in truth, the early medieval centuries deserve recognition not for the supposed darkness, but for their endurance and creativity. It was during this time that Europe's modern languages, nations, and institutions began to take shape,
that Christianity established its lasting influence and that new cultural syntheses emerged from the meeting of Roman, Germanic, and Christian worlds. In sum, the Dark Ages were not an age without light, but one illuminated differently, a dawn rather than a dusk. The collapse of Rome did not extinguish civilization, it transformed it. Amid invasions, political fragmentation, and hardship, people across Europe and beyond found new ways to organize society, express faith, and preserve knowledge. The monasteries kept learning alive, artisans crafted magnificent works of art, rulers like Charlemagne dreamed of unity and order, and scholars in Byzantium and the Islamic world carried the torch of reason and inquiry. The light of human creativity never truly went out, it simply shifted, flickered, and eventually grew brighter again. Understanding this period not as a dark void, but as a dynamic era of transformation allows us to appreciate the resilience of humanity in the face of change. The Dark Ages, therefore, were never truly dark. They were the crucible from which the modern world was born.